What is up, YouTube? Welcome back to the Cutlass project build series, where I take this Cutlass wagon I found in this dude's backyard, pull it out of the weeds, and start tearing this thing apart. I'm building this car to be my next power tour car. It's going to be pretty unique, and you won't see anything else like it out there, at least as far as I can tell. I'm all about the unique cars, and this one is definitely up there. It's going to have a 3800 with an F23 5-speed manual, and a bunch of other really cool stuff to really set this car apart from the rest of them. I'm doing a whole build series in this car. So in the last few videos, you guys watched me tear out all the interior, tore out the old engine, the old 2.5 liter 4-cylinder that made 130 horsepower on a good day, and put in a 3800 with the F23 5-speed. This thing is going to make some power. It's going to be totally different, totally unique. And I also built the turbo hot side for this thing, so it's got the turbo plumbing, all the exhaust for that. And then also built a custom intake manifold for this thing from scratch, so a lot has happened so far. So in this video, what we're going to do is we're going to build the clutch pedal for this car. It'll be like the first A-body I've ever seen with a hydraulic clutch pedal. So stay tuned for that, and let's just dive into this project. Alright guys, so I'm looking at this car right now, trying to figure out where everything is going to sit, and I'm getting the strangest feelings of deja vu all over again. This is going to be just like the Grand Prix was to get that thing installed. So the Grand Prix I converted to a stick shift and had to find a spot in the firewall to make that thing actually fit in there. And it's looking like it's going to be almost the exact same setup as the Grand Prix was, where you have this vacuum controlled cruise module that has a vacuum hose that passes through the firewall right here before it goes to this cruise module. And the way that that works is that if you push the brake pedal down, it lets out all the vacuum held in this canister and then releases the cruise from working. So that passes through the firewall in like the exact same location that it does on the Grand Prix in the G bodies. What's important about that is, for that, they use the hole that's about right here, which is like the perfect location for a clutch master cylinder. This is probably the same hole that's used in the stick shift cars, because this car did have a stick shift option for a couple years back in the 80s. At least the platform did. I don't know about the Cutlasses. Maybe internationally it did, but I might be using that exact same hole with some bracing. Now, I do have a lot of things to work around here. This one's a bit tighter than the other car. This bracket up top here is gonna be problematic, I think. The only way to know is to start pulling this apart and try and figure out how this is all gonna fit. So I did actually pick up a clutch pedal setup for a Cavalier, and I think that's what's in this box. But yeah, that's exactly what this is. So this is the clutch pedal assembly that I will probably be using and modifying to fit this car. So this is for a Cavalier, so it's the right geometry for that clutch. So the master cylinder itself is going to get mounted on those holes there, and that's what's going to go onto the firewall. And the rest of this, I'll have to figure out how I'm going to make all that fit there. So that's going to be a significant challenge, I think. But the benefit of this is that it's all hydraulic. There's no geometry aside from what you have here and on the clutch itself. So it should keep things relatively simple. It's just going to be a matter of, can I actually fit it inside of this car? And it looks like the answer right now is no. But we'll try some stuff out here. We'll modify it, cut it up if we need to. Alright, so I'm taking this thing apart a little bit more, just trying to investigate how much room I've got inside of this spot. And there's this bracket up here that holds the column in a little bit. And it also holds in the shifter cable, which goes into the column too. And so I already pulled this off of here because I'm not going to be using this anymore, right? So we're going to a stick shift, 5 in the floor. No more need for anything like this. Because of that, it looks like I could actually just cut this bracket apart and remove everything from this side over, because all the functional bits that I'm keeping are right here. None of this is necessary anymore. And there is a little wire harness mount, but that's not a big deal. But that's going to give me a bit more space in here. Going to go ahead and cut this mount off. That's what I'll do for that. And then we'll see if I can squeezing the clutch pedal inside of here still too. I'll have to cut off this brake pedal, probably somewhere right in the middle here. So I'll cut this pedal apart a little bit, and then I'll have more room for the new clutch pedal, which we'll try and squeeze in here somewhere. Let's see what's, yeah, it's gonna be tight, you guys, so that will be interesting. So here's the clutch pedal assembly. It is a very long pedal, so I don't think this has any shot at all fitting inside of here. It seems silly for me to try this, but if I can get close, that would be good. I'm just curious like how far away I am from making it work. Well, so it's not even up to where it needs to be. It's facing down more than it should, and it really wants to go up and occupy this space up here to get in the right spot, and it would need to come up at least, if I had to guess here, a few more inches for it to try and get in. Options now are to cut this blue piece above it. I'll probably modify this pedal assembly a lot to make this work. I don't know if there's a better pedal assembly out there that could work for this. This car did come with a stick shift option some years, but it came with a mechanical linkage. They're pretty much non-existent anymore. You can't get these things for this car. This one's for a Cavalier. This way, I got the right pedal for the same transmission, thinking that I could just use it as if it's stock. So I have the right geometry for everything for the clutch master. So that was the idea, and looks like it's actually kind of bent actually, so I'm not too happy about that. But at the very least, I'll be able to take this thing and do some measurements. This is going to be probably the biggest hurdle of making this swap work. I think what I'm going to do here is try and shave off all the excess up top here and down here, just outside of this pivot point. Probably cut it from here on over, then maybe pull off a little bit down this way too. Just try and get as much clearance as possible inside of that car, and then I'll probably have to cut some of the car too a little bit. Won't be a big deal. And then also this bracket too as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and get to it, get this thing cut off. All right, so I've got both of these brackets shaved off a little bit. So here's the clutch pedal assembly, and I shaved off the front half of it where it goes forward there, and just tack welded some bracing back on there because it trying to keep it all in one piece there, because I had to cut it where it actually was. I don't know if it was riveted. I didn't look that closely. This piece here that is held on there, it's not really that functional. So it's not that big of a deal. It really just gives some bracing in the front of this that I can tell that's actually helpful. Otherwise, it's just for mounting the switches to tell you if the clutch is up or clutch is down. I got this shaved off fairly well. I could probably go a little bit further, but I don't want to get too far or too close to that pivot. And I'll probably, once I know for sure where this is going to sit, I'll grind this down, smooth it out, paint it up so it doesn't rust. And then I went ahead and shaved this one down too, because this one is the one that goes right up here like that. And then it occupies that space that this clutch pedal would have sat in. So just shaving that down a little bit, that way I can actually use that space there. And I think this one is pretty much done. It's just gonna need some paint probably, but I'm gonna try and mock this up here and see how this fits. So it's a lot better. It's still not going in there though. We're hitting here a little bit on that part right there. So I am gonna have to cut off some of this. I think I'm gonna cut from here on over, right about where this piece does that little jog over. And there's nothing structural there on this side. It's really just like that. I might go back in here and tack weld that in after I cut this out. And I'm not using that bolt hole for anything as far as I know. All right, so I've got this thing relatively set in here, so it does go in now. I shaved off quite a bit of material here, so this is the piece I shaved off of that, and so that's a pretty significant amount of metal that I pulled off of this thing. And it's pretty thick too, but you can see that's where it was sitting, and now this whole clutch pedal will basically come in here so I can get it rocked forward and then rock it back inside of there. Okay, so the clutch pedal does sit in here, and you can see it is relatively lined up with that hole there. The hole is in the firewall is bigger than the one in the clutch pedal. I'm not quite sure how this is going to sit here yet. It's not quite flat on that flange, so I need to straighten up that flange. That way I can actually bolt this thing down and figure that out. Then after that, it's just a matter of getting this pedal to move further to the right. The mounting point won't change. I'll just cut this pedal down here. The actual shaft, or the pedal lever, I don't know what you would call that, the pedal arm there. I'll cut that probably somewhere right in here, and just kind of move that whole thing over to the right and move it forward more, because it is way too far towards the driver. So I'll push it forward towards the front of the car more a little bit too. But the first hurdle is getting this thing in a spot where it can get bolted in. So I'm assuming the master just bolts in here, and so I'll probably end up cutting these rivets out and weld it together at this seam here instead of using those rivets. Use bolts to hold it in probably. So I'll figure out what the spacing is in that, and then I'll put the holes in the firewall for that. It turns out the hole in the firewall is a little bit bigger than it needs to be, so the bolts don't really grab, and they kind of go in towards the center of the hole. I have some concerns about this clutch master cylinder. Like, I'm worried that it's not going to go in all the way with this clutch pedal assembly, especially if I put more spacers behind it. So the current idea right now I'm playing with is if I'm going to put a plate behind this to give this more strength, because right now, like, I'm worried that this isn't going to hold very well. So I think I'm going to weld a plate inside of here just to give this something more stiff to bolt onto, because this is going to rip off the firewall like that. Now, of course, I'm going to add a brace here on this side too, so it's not just a brace at the firewall. And thankfully, this is all just one big strong assembly, so it's not like I'm prying against these two different spots. It's all the force is contained inside of this box basically. So that's one advantage of this one over what's in the Grand Prix. So it should still be pretty strong. It doesn't need to have a lot of strength to push the pedal down. It's just a matter of making sure that it doesn't move anywhere. All right, so I'm back in this car working this clutch pedal again. The goal today is to get this thing all sorted out, bolted in, and secured, so it doesn't do any of this shaking nonsense it's doing right now. So don't want any of that, so I'll have to secure it somewhere up here probably. I also need to modify the brake pedal too as well. So when you go to a stick shift, you kind of want to have the smaller pedals so you can keep them kind of close together. I'm not sure exactly where this one's going to be at, but it can't be where it's at because it hits the floor right now and the clutch pedal won't go all the way down. So it needs to get moved over. So I'm probably going to cut it somewhere along right here and get this thing going sideways like this, or diagonally over here. Basically put it right here where this one's at, or maybe a little bit off the side. And then also I'll need to cut this one to clear up some space here for it. So I basically made a template out of this clutch pedal and put that right here, so it's going to be something like that. So it'll be pretty small. I have these clutch pedal pads too as well, so these are matching pads for both pedals. I use the one from the newer car, so this is the Cavalier clutch pedal pad, and it actually kind of matches the OG original one for this car, so I'm okay with that. That's pretty cool. Was not intentional, but I'm happy it's gonna match, so that's kind of cool. It'll match the gas pedal too as well, so that'll be neat. So I'll get this clutch pedal cut somewhere along here, and then I'll re-weld it diagonally and cut it somewhere along here too as well to give it the correct angle for this, and probably have to cut up some material out of it. And then I'll cut this one too along this line. I'll have to cut some of the bracing back here too, so it's got some of that needs to go. Once that's done though, I do need to check the travel of the clutch pedal, and I might need to cut this little nub off here on both sides and then move it further forward or backwards depending on how much pedal travel I have, because I had to brace the firewall to make this thing fit in here. So I don't know how much of that you can see, but I had to basically weld in another piece of sheet metal to get this thing strong enough for the clutch pedal, and so that had to happen. And unfortunately, that added like about a 1/16 of an inch of spacing between this and the master cylinder. So that means I don't have as much of engagement on the master cylinder as I needed. So I'll have to check that it has enough engagement, and I think what's going to happen here is I'm going to have to basically move this button forward on the place where the rod mounts on. So I'll have to cut this off or something, or then use a die grinder to push it further forward and get some more angle out of it. So I'll have to do some back and forth tedious measurements that is going to really frustrate me, but I'd rather have it sorted now than figure this out later that I don't have all of my clutch engagement. So knock out some of the stuff, and then I can move on to some more of the fun stuff. And then once that fun stuff is done, I can do the really fun stuff, which is wiring, putting the dashboard back in, figuring out how all the plumbing's going to work. So, I mean, all this stuff is fun, but some of this stuff is more fun than some other stuff, you know? So, I'm looking forward to the really fun stuff, though, you know, if you get what I'm saying. So I'm going to get to work on this thing. I'll get my angle grinder here and just use a cutoff wheel. I might have to trim off some of this side too, but I'm sure I'll figure out some of that stuff later. One thing that I'll point out here too, as a word of advice, if you're doing any of this sort of thing, cover your windshields and your windows with something so they don't get metal specks flying inside of them. That's how you get like these flakes that actually will basically melt that little spot it hits, and it'll stick to the window. Basically, you'll have all these little bumps on your windshield or your windows because of that. It's not great, and it's really frustrating to look at in the light. So learn from my mistakes I made in that car, and actually protect your windows when you're welding, cutting, grinding, or whatever. Nice little word of advice there for you. So I'm going to do that. I have this piece of cardboard here. It's going to just cover the window while I work on this thing. These ones are all rolled down, so that way nothing can touch them, and I'm not as concerned about the mirrors. So yeah, let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so I've got my first cuts done. I've got the clutch pedal cut down pretty well. I also cut down the brake pedal to be about the same size as the clutch pedal, so you can see they're pretty close to each other. They kind of almost match a little bit. If I kind of place this in front of it, it seems like it's going to be good. So I'm happy with that, and I did already do like a test fit with the old pedal pad, and that seems to fit just fine. Now we move on to the real struggle, is figuring out where it's going to sit and getting the height correct. And I think it's going to be about right here, and got to get the height and the angle correct, and then somehow hold it there while I tack weld it, and hopefully it comes out well enough that I'm happy with it, and when I stare at the car every day I get into the car, I'm not upset about it. So I think it's going to be somewhere around here to keep it away from this little notch in the floor, and also give my feet enough room to do whatever they need to do. Maybe someday I'll be able to heel a toe if I get this placement correct. So I'll go ahead and make sure I have this little piece cut down the way it needs to be to give me that right angle on it. So it's going to be tack weld it, modify it, cut it, tack weld it, cut it, modify it, maybe fully weld it, and then maybe hopefully it's good. So it's going to be a lot of back and forth here, but at the end of this, hopefully I'm pretty happy with the position of that clutch pedal. Alright, so I think I've got a plan here. The plan is to use 2x4 cutoff, found two that fit somewhat vertical, and I'm using the brake pedal pad as a lift for it too, and another 2x4 to get that height right. So this will set the height for me, and then the distance will just be determined by how much of this metal I have here in this little bracket. So I'm going to try and tack this in, and hopefully I'll be happy with the results. It's going to be pretty ugly, but it's going to do the job. And with enough grinding, we'll make it work out pretty good. There's just the angles are all weird and funky, and I'm like not patient enough to deal with that. So it is what it is. We'll get this thing welded in though. Okay guys, so I've got the clutch pedal kind of where it should be, and I was gonna go ahead and just burn the whole thing in, but then I remembered that this placement or depth really for forwards and backwards is really determined by this rod here. It goes in the master cylinder. I'm not sure if I need to extend it or move that rod mounting point, so if I do have to move that, then that means I need to move this forwards and backwards too. based off of however far or deep that thing has to go. So I need to first check that it is getting all the engagement it needs. And so that's going to be kind of tricky to figure out. So what I'll do here is I'll pull it off of this. Okay, and then that's going to come forward. All right. And I will use my caliper down here to just see the depth it goes to when I push it in all the way, just to make sure I can actually get that much depth out of it with it on the clutch pedal too. That's what I'm gonna try and do here at least, so hopefully that kind of works out. All right, so I've got this thing out of the car. Wasn't as bad to get out of the car as I remember it being, but so I'm working on trying to get this little button off here where the master cylinder is gonna mount. And I've given this quite a bit of tries here to try and get this thing to unscrew. I don't know if it does unscrew. You know, I'm assuming based off of that little head there, it would unscrew, but it doesn't seem like it wants to do that. So I've given up on that. So what I'm gonna do instead is I'm just gonna cut this thing off and then hammer it through. And then I'll start doing all my die grinding to push it forward this way or this way. This way is where it needs to go. So I'll go ahead and work on that, do this real quick, and hopefully have this thing buttoned up in a matter of seconds. Let's get to it. All right, so I've got this little pin out, finally. Pin, button, I'm not sure what I'm calling it yet. I change my mind every time I talk about it. But yeah, it's out. I had to drill this thing out and just try and press it through. It wouldn't just come out easily. I tried rotating it. I tried to grab it really hard and kind of damage it a little bit trying to get it out, but eventually it did come out with enough drilling, and I can always just fill this up with weld afterwards. So I'm not too concerned about that. All right, so now I've got to move this thing about a 1/4 inch this way. I needed about 6 or 7 millimeters, so I'll go ahead and I'll use a die grinder and try and get some more of this out here. Just kind of go from there. So we'll see how that works out. All right, so here you can see the original position, and here is about where I use a die grinder to get this thing out of there. I think it's gonna end up about right here. I took off some extra just in case, but measuring it right now with the caliper, it looks like this is about where it's gonna be. So I'm going to go ahead and weld this thing in and stiffen up this side of it a little bit to make sure this stays pretty much reinforced, and go ahead and test fit in the car. See how that goes. Well, the clutch pedal is in here. It has all the travel it needs as far as I can tell, and it does close up that switch there, which is good too. So that's important because that's what I'm going to use to make sure the car starts. And as expected, the clutch pedal is further forward than it should be. By about 1.5 inches or so. So I'll have to go ahead and basically cut off what I just welded on and to move these things back to where they need to be. Yeah, it's coming along. I think this is gonna work. So I will go ahead, cut these off, re-weld them back on in the proper position, and then pull this whole clutch pedal assembly off, and then fully weld it all, paint it, and paint the firewall where I welded on some of that extra material. And so once that's done, I'll be fully done with the clutch pedal until I figure out that I messed it up completely somehow and have to take it all apart and do it all over again. But I think we're looking good. So I'll go ahead and get her started. Okay guys, clutch pedal is done. It is painted, it is welded, it is solid, it goes down all the way. It is good. It's a little bit further forward than the brake pedal, but I don't care. It is what it is. I'm happy enough with it. There's no way I'm taking this thing off ever again unless I really have to. So hopefully this is all good here. So next thing I can do is start to work on putting these pedal pads on. So here's the one for the brake pedal. I actually notched this one a little bit because of this little cutout there. So hopefully this kind of matches that and I can kind of stuff that on there. See how it looks. All right, so brake pedal, clutch pedal are in. Not looking too bad. I think I could have put this a little bit further over here, but I'm not upset about it. I can always have like my foot on this like somewhere over here basically. That way there's still plenty of room, and yeah, I think it came out pretty good, I think. So the accelerator pedal will be up here like this, and then you have the brake pedal right here, clutch pedal. Clears everything, looks good, it's solid, it feels solid, no more shaking going on. I braced it up here, got that brace in, all bolted down. She came together pretty well, man. It's looking good. So I'm happy with this. So look at that, an A body with a clutch pedal, with a hydraulic clutch pedal. I'm pretty sure these came with like mechanical forks. So back in the 80s, these cars came with a stick shift option, but I'm pretty sure it was a mechanical fork. So now we have a hydraulic clutch pedal A-body. That's pretty nifty. Pretty happy with that, man. So that's gonna be awesome. It's gonna be real good. It does hit the floor a little bit there, but all things considered, it's not too bad. And worst case scenario, if it's an issue, I can always cut something like the carpet or this foam or something and make it all fit nicely. And the pedals still match, so that's awesome. So no more disc brake pedal. We have the M pedals now. Tell me what that means. I don't know. So yeah, all things considered, it's looking good. I'm happy with this.